Does the MG-206 actually have a place in your arsenal? And how does it compare against the MG-43? That is what we're going to be finding out today. Greetings, Helldivers. Today we'll be looking at the newly introduced support weapon, the MG-206 Heavy Machine Gun. We'll be comparing it in greater detail against the other classes of machine gun and learning about how this weapon performs, when and where to use it, as well as some tips to making the most of its potential. So let's get it on. As usual, we'll start off with one of my many tables, and this time we'll be seeing some additional detail that I've only just learned to put together. No doubt you're looking at the damage row and wondering how I got these numbers. There was no data mining involved, just good old math and the application of the scientific method. I will have an entire video dedicated to explaining this process in excruciating detail, but the long story short is, by first understanding the attributes and characteristics of the shield generator relay, I found I could use it as a better and more consistent punching bag than the mech. So I tested how many rounds it would take all of our weapons with known damage numbers to break it, to create a pool of numbers from which I could find out how much health the shield generator had. Once I could do that, it was just a matter of doing the calculations for the support weapons I wanted to test, finding out the minimum and maximum values, then narrowing down the expected damage range, and finally figuring out the average damage per shot. Simple, but very tedious if I wanted to be accurate. If you didn't understand any of that, that's okay, that's what the explanation video will be for. But for now, you can trust that these numbers are about as reasonably accurate as I can get them given the tools and methodologies I have applied. They are also consistent with some of the numbers I've been observing from other commenters as well. Anyway, back to the table. If you take the time to look at the table, you'll notice that apart from damage, penetration, and resupply value, the MG-206 falls short in every other variable when compared against the Stalwart, which is really more like a primary weapon, and the MG-43, the main weapon everyone is probably drawing comparisons against. For this reason, I've made a direct comparison table matching the 206 against the MG-43. But before looking at that, I want to take this opportunity to correct myself in regards to the HMG emplacement. In the original guide video, I referred to it as being two MG-43s duct taped together and mounted on a lazy Susan. Through the comments of that video as well as my own testing, I have since learned that I am wrong. Here's a table to bring the HMG emplacement into the picture. As you can see, it does a lot of damage, almost double the 206, and given its huge mag size of 300, this stratagem has nothing to offer but, and I believe this is the scientific term for it, a metric assload of medium 2 AP damage which pierces strider bodies, Hulk visors, gunship engines, and can rip all but the heaviest of bugs to shreds. So, given this, what the HMG emplacement really is two anti-material rifles duct taped together with a keg full of bullets glued below it, which is then mounted on a lazy Susan. Now that I have corrected myself sufficiently, we can return to looking at the 206. For the purposes of this comparison, I'll be setting both the machine guns to similar RPM rates available to them. This makes for a more even comparison. Taking a look at the table, we see that the 206 has 26% more damage over the MG-43 at 102 damage per bullet, which provides it with a 22% higher DPS. This higher damage is also paired with an upgrade to its armor penetration. It has the same tier of penetration as the HMG emplacement. The other notable characteristic of the 206 is its resupply value of 2. This means it gets 2 mags back from a resupply brick, which is twice the amount of the MG-43. Unfortunately for the 206, that is all the positive things to talk about in this comparison. In exchange for more damage and a higher tier of penetration, the 206 gives up a lot. It has half the total ammo at 225 rounds, it has half the mag size at 75 rounds, which leads it to having a much lower total damage per mag, and it can't sustain its damage output for very long either. Despite being a heavy weapon, the total firepower it brings to the table is also lower than the MG-43 by a significant amount. It also has a glacial reload speed of 7.2 seconds, a whole 44% slower than the already painfully slow MG-43. And, to top it all off, it has no brace sights, which makes firing from the hip inconvenient. Its ADS sights aren't very helpful when trying to engage in longer distances. It has the handling of a very reluctant donkey, and it even kicks like one with the recoil it has when full auto. So with so many negatives working against the 206, what is even the point of bringing it with you into a mission? What is it even supposed to do? If you analyze the numbers closely and add some context to it, the table actually tells you how to use the weapon. The key thing is to pay attention to its penetration value. The main reason why the MG-43 is stronger than the Stalwart is because it can deal with medium armored enemies like bile spewers, hive guards, and devastators. However, Because the MG-43 only has medium 1 penetration, it is only matching the armor value of these very common medium armored enemies, meaning it's only doing 50% of its damage against them. Meanwhile, at medium 2 penetration, the 206 is dealing full damage to these enemies, which explains why it shreds them apart so quickly compared to the MG-43. So, if we add the context of fighting against medium armored enemies only, the comparison table further highlights the 206's relative strength. When dealing with these enemies specifically, the 206 is far superior compared to the MG-43, having effectively 2.5 times the damage output and neutralizing its disadvantages when it comes to damage per mag and total firepower. But the advantages don't stop there. The 206 can do so much more with its higher penetration. It can gun down striders with shots to their body, take down hulks to the visor, shred tanks and cannon towers, shoot down automaton gunships, and even take down shrieker nests from afar. Not the most ammo efficient way to do it, but it works. When you combine all these advantages against its disadvantage of having a small mag, long reload, and terrible handling, you'll find that it's a weapon meant to be used as a response tool rather than an active one like the MG-43. The 206, in my opinion and experience, is best used against bugs rather than bots, as a rapid response weapon to deal with patrols that have armored enemies sprinkled in. The fact that bugs will also approach you negates part of the terrible long-range accuracy of the weapon. Its higher damage and DPS means it can also shred stalkers and brute commanders really quickly too, much better than the MG-43 can. And when it comes to stalkers, you know you want them dead ASAP. Speaking of which, here is the RPM comparison table. So you know how fast you can rip those invisible bastards to pieces when you get the chance to do so. I find keeping it at 750 RPM and tap firing provides me the most consistent performance in terms of damage output and managing its recoil and stability. I don't think this weapon should ever be used on full auto because you probably waste too many rounds unnecessarily, something you really can't afford to do with this weapon. Now that we've gotten a very thorough understanding on how the 206 works and where it stands compared to the MG-43, I can provide you with some tips to get the most out of it. Because this is a response weapon, it's best if you keep it stowed until you need to use it. This not only helps with trigger discipline so you don't waste the precious 75 rounds you've got, but there's also another benefit of doing so. If you aim with your primary or secondary first, you can use the sights to gauge where your 206 will be aiming when you pull it out. This allows you to immediately know where your shots are going to land without having to waste bullets adjusting and prevents you from having to ADS as well. I have found this to be extremely helpful in making my shots count. While not mandatory, I have found the supply pack to be an excellent backpack to use with the 206, taking advantage of the fact that it gets 2 mags back whenever you resupply. This sort of makes up for its low total ammo count and allows you to be more active in using the 206 for dealing with problems. The supply pack also complements what I think is the best grenade for the 206, the stun grenade. Not only does the stun grenade help your offensive stratagems by making enemies more easier to hit, it also gives you the breathing room you so desperately need when you have to reload during combat. In my many games of experimenting with the 206, the games where I perform pretty well are always when I have stun grenades. On top of allowing me to easily set up the orbitals and airstrikes, it also contributes to improving my accuracy by giving me time to take more measured shots against priority targets. With stun grenades and some good positioning, you can actually deal with charges pretty decently by blasting off its butt and letting it bleed out. Not the most immediate solution, but you aren't helpless either. And finally, to tie the whole package together, the perfect armor for making the most of the 206 with this setup is going to be one that has the engineering kit passive. Not only do you get better stability while shooting, but the additional grenades help a lot when you're trying to hold the line, near the breather, or to guarantee an enemy is stuck in place to get hit by an orbital or eagle strike. Alright, that brings us to the end of the video. This one took a while longer to produce because I was spending a lot of time trying to work on my damage calculations, testing, and formulas. I really wanted to find a way to get the damage numbers out because I believe it helps a lot when making comparisons, and it gives you a better idea on the potential of a weapon when you choose to bring it into a mission with you. As for my thoughts on the MG-206, I think it's not as bad as some of the first impressions people gave it when it dropped. However, I certainly find it hard to find myself in a situation where I thought, you know what would have helped me there? The MG-206. If anything, I find myself wishing I was using a different weapon most of the time. The MG-206 could really use some help in terms of performance if it is to be a serious consideration for bringing on the regular. A larger magazine, or an extra reload, or even having much better stability when going prone would help give this weapon more presence in a loadout. At the very least, these buffs would make it not a chore to use and actually be enjoyable to shoot with. Also, please give it brace sights, that alone would help a lot as well. If you've enjoyed watching this video and want to see more in-depth guides and reviews, consider dropping a like and subscribing. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Over and out, Helldivers.